Welcome back to the Coaching Lab podcast. My name is Lee Baker, and I'm your host for today's episode, where we will discuss how to take care of your well-being while running a business. When things start moving in business, sometimes that can come at the expense of our health. This episode isn't about making you feel guilty for feeling like your routine is imbalanced. Our hope is that by sharing our experience of lessons learned along the way and strategies for how we've learned to recalibrate our routine to support business and health, it will not only normalize the challenges in this area, but offer ideas and hope for how these things can coexist. And we love that you found the podcast and wanted to offer a quick opportunity to let you know about ways to pour into your wellness journey while generating renewed energy and ideas for your business or projects. This September 25th through 27th, we will be hosting our 8th annual coaching retreat and symposium in Estes Park, Colorado, a weekend designed specifically for health coaches who want deeper connection, meaningful growth, and space to focus on their well-being. For more information, you can head to Catalyst Coaching Institute's website. And for this conversation today, I am joined by Dr. Brad Cooper and Susie Desterak. Together, we bring decades of experience in the health and coaching space. And in this episode, we're going to talk about our own experience with finding the foundations of business and wellness that have supported our own success and journey. We'll also dive into ideas around systems that can be in place to support your health. If you are in business, the independent contracting world, or are considering taking a step into entrepreneurship without compromising on your values around health and well-being, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Coaching Lab podcast. I am thrilled to be talking about this today with two powerhouses, Dr. Brad Cooper and Susie Desterak. We are going to be talking about business and well-being. So taking care of your well-being while running a business. Or a project related to business. So before we dive into all of those things and lessons learned along the way, we're going to give you a little picture of what lens we bring in. So my name is Lee Baker, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. I also work with the Catalyst Coaching Institute as the VP of Growth and Development, and I have been coaching for about 6 years. So I bring that coaching lens in of how we structure time without compromising on our health. And lessons I've learned about that.
I'm Susie Desterak. I've been a board certified health and wellness coach and been doing coaching in that field for the last 6 years. I have a couple of different arms of my business. So I also do cooking classes. So that's another piece of that. And I'm really excited to share some of my expertise and experience.
This is going to be so much fun. I'm Brad. We started Catalyst in 2007. So this is year 20, which is hard to believe. It was a unique idea at the time. I come with a background in business, physical therapist initially, and then went back for an MBA. I've got a PhD in performance psychology, and I love that side of it, of thinking these things through and what does that look like and how does that roll. So we've learned a lot through making mistakes, and I'm happy to share those as we go through this today. And Lee, thanks for teeing this up.
Yes, thrilled that three of us are in this space again. And a short little plug here is that if this episode is like just blows your mind today and you're like, wow, I'm ready to calibrate my business and pull in systems and support my health, we've also got an episode on pricing and then an episode on just business. So it's a 3-part series that we have done together. But in terms of today, with talking about well-being, and Brad, you mentioned this too, that it doesn't look like perfection along the way. It's not linear. We've learned things the hard way. I know I have over the years on how to, I wouldn't say balance these two things, but find that they can coexist without compromising on one or the other. But I'd love to start us off with maybe sharing a moment when running business felt unsustainable. So Susie, if you'd like to share maybe a little bit about that to kick us off.
I would love to jump in there. And when I think of the unsustainable, those kind of feelings of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What did I get myself into? It was really early on because I'm also a mom. So I have 3 kids. And at the time that I started my business, I was a single mom and I was balancing all these roles and really, I think the transition of seeing even myself as a business owner and my ability to do this, that just felt really scary to me. And I think also at the same time, I was like kind of reinventing myself with my community, that I was being seen as a stay-at-home mom all this time, and they kind of knew me that way. And so I had to break out of that, and I had to create structures that supported my mental well-being, my business well-being, and just kind of get over that. I think also alongside that is the piece of not, when you're doing your own business, and especially when you're starting something, you don't know where that income is necessarily going to come from. So it's a little bit of a leap of faith, and just building the whole structure. So I would say those were some areas that felt just scary and unsustainable for me.
Yeah, and for me, that first 8 months, I didn't know if it was going to work. We had started something that, I don't know if we were the very first company to make coaching the centerpiece of an employee wellness strategy, but we were among the first. And so every conversation was not, I wasn't even selling us to companies or benefit directors or those kind of folks. I was explaining, what is this? They were literally looking at me going, no, what? It's changed. I mean, 20 years later, we have the MBHWC. We've got all this structure. It's an established thing. So now it's a completely different conversation. But I literally got 6-7 months into the process. We didn't have a single client yet. We really didn't have any significant opportunities sitting there on the table. And I was ready to say, I don't know if it's going to happen.
So a little bit of uncertainty,
Yeah.
And then a different season of life too, Susie, that you're mentioning, of how to figure out how all of these things that are important can coexist and what that looks like. And yeah.
And the unsustainability, it's not just about your business. Susie mentioned she was coming into a new phase of life. She was reinventing herself. We're all doing that. It's Lee mentioned what we've learned during the introduction. And I think what you're going to hear in this is what we're learning. Like this,
Exactly.
20 years in, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, we're still trying to figure this out, because the answers that were right yesterday aren't the right answers today. The things that worked 20 years ago don't work now. So how do we adjust to that, and how do we move and flow, and almost the old concept of being water, and not forcing it, but moving as the river allows that to happen?
Yes, adapting along the way. So we can put that plug in there, that we're continuing to learn. And the area of, I would say, unsustainability lies in when we're too rigid about our expectation of what something looks like. Right?
100%.
And that's
For
when
sure.
we rub up against like unsustainability, and when we allow for adaptation and adjustment based on different seasons and what we learn over time, that helps us build that sustainability.
Yeah.
What surprised you all most about the toll that maybe comes with running a business?
I think for me, it was the roller coaster. I love endurance sports, Ironmans, marathons, whatever. And that's something that you get out of it what you put into it. It's almost linear. If you put the time in to do X, obviously based on some genetic things, you're going to get Y. And running a business is not like that. You can work your butt off 90-hour weeks for 6 months, as I was doing initially, and see nothing and feel like, and that was very hard on me to say, oh, this thing that worked for the first 40 years of my life, you work harder, you get these results. You train harder, you get these results. You spend more time studying, you get better grades, et cetera. It didn't work. And I'll come back to that later, because I say it didn't work. It worked, but not the way I expected it to. It was not linear.
That's interesting that you say that, Brad, because I'm curious to see what you say about the efforts that you did and the things that you put in, because I have some thoughts on that as well. I think for me, I didn't expect to feel that. I mean, you hear about imposter syndrome, and I wish there was another name, because I think it's so overused. But I didn't expect to feel take such a ding on my confidence, because I've always been a really confident person, and I've always been really positive and had this positive self-image. And I got into business and I was like, wow, there's a lot I don't know. What in the world am I doing? You're wearing all these hats all of a sudden that you didn't intend, because I'm like, oh, well, yeah, the health and wellness piece, that's me. But it comes along with a lot of other stuff. So I think that surprised me. And I had to kind of grow into that. I had to learn a lot of things. And now I'm so thankful for it. And some of those aspects are actually super exciting to me now. But yeah, I didn't expect to get that hit.
Man, that's powerful, because as we think about it, we always have this idea of what business is going to look like and how it's going to fit into our life. And what I'm hearing is it sometimes looks completely different and is overwhelming and almost makes us think like, this isn't the space for us, right? And then if we look back on that, so much more now than, because we've learned about these things and we have more confidence with because when you think about a coaching business, you think about, okay, I'm a great coach. I've also got to wear hat. Yeah. I've also got to wear the billing hat. I've also got to wear the marketing manager hat. I've also got to do all these other things that I didn't sign up for. Right. And it's really like stepping into that with curiosity and self-compassion. Otherwise, it's unsustainable because we think we don't have a seat at that table. And that can be really hard on our self-confidence when we're in business. What other things have you all noticed in terms of surprises when balancing business and maybe like your own thoughts, emotions, feelings?
Yeah, I don't think I was as aware of the emotional toll. The two of you may have heard this story because we share it within our team, but there was a period about, I don't know, a year and a half in or so where I'm an emotional guy. Like I get excited, but I don't get mad. I never yell in our family. And one night we lost a client and I slammed the door and Susanna laid the law down. And she literally got in my face and said, if this is how it's going to be, we're going to close this company down right now because this is going to influence our family, not just our finances. And it was beautiful timing. And I love my wife dearly. I respect her immensely. And it stuck. Like I can picture that moment even today where she said, no, Brad, this is important. The company matters. We're doing good things. But if this is going to be an outburst that occurs in our family, we're not doing it anymore. And we didn't. But I don't think I was tuned into the emotional toll it was taking, and this is my fault. I lost this client. This is terrible. It's going to ruin the future, toilet bowl syndrome where everything cycles downward. And so that was a key moment for us as a couple, but certainly as an organization.
Yeah. I'd say the spiraling, like that's, I feel like the unexpected, like things that happen is when something bad, I guess, happens in business. It's not just, okay, we lost this client. There's all these other like emotional connections to that. And I'd say, yeah. And like the surprising thing is, it's surprising and not surprising is that if you're running a business or you've got a project that you are deeply passionate about and have a lot, like you're connected to, no one else will ever care as much about it as you do, which then in that like role when you're in your family or like, I feel like in an environment, they won't have that same connection. And it's hard sometimes when things aren't going well or when things are going well and you're working long hours and people aren't maybe necessarily understanding how that fits, because I feel like we've got that emotional connection and it's hard to understand how to have a healthy relationship, right, with business, I would say. So that's an interesting point that you bring up about connection. And it sort of sparked another thought in me, and that is about feeling isolated. Most new health and wellness coaches are going out on their own. Maybe you're doing something with a couple of coworkers, and that's great. But for most of us, it can be really lonely and feel isolating. And it's so important to find your tribe, and that can take time. A couple of just resources out there is our Facebook group that we have. I think that's an amazing resource for coaches
coaches, especially new coaches, to get connected. But yeah, finding your people, whether it's a networking group, some sort of business group, but being with like-minded other business owners that are up to some similar things.
Yeah, and that's why we're
100%.
trying that business program at the retreat this year, because the retreat is always a special weekend anyway of coaches coming together from all these different settings. And sorry for the little plug here, everybody. But this year, Lee had this idea of, well, what if we did something before the retreat started focused on business? Because about a third to a half, maybe slightly over, of the attendees are there for business. And yet we've never done something specific to business. So I think that feeds into what you're talking about. But even if that doesn't work for you, there are options in your area, whether it's through your small business organization in your city or the chamber, or just start something yourself. There are many options out there in addition to that retreat option.
Yeah, I'd say it's like Susie and Brad mentioned, finding community and like-minded people. And, when things start to feel unsustainable or you're brushing up against, burnout or feeling lost, like leaning into your community is kind of the theme here of like, there are people who maybe have similar experiences or are feeling similarly. We'll talk today about probably some of the things that you can resonate with, and know that you're not alone in that, and leaning into people that are going to support you, brainstorm with you, fill your cup up, is the key to being able to feel like you got this, I'd say. Where did you all, man, we could go a bunch of different ways with this. I think about, unsustainability or surprises along the way. Where do you feel like you personally overextended yourself in the beginning of business, and why do you think that happened?
Oh, wow. Brad, I'm so curious to hear your perspective, especially on building a larger company. For me, like I said, it was about that transition of becoming a business owner and learning how to really prioritize my time and be intentional. It was very easy. I think it's so easy for families in general to get very overextended, and you're into too many groups and too many things, and then here pretty soon you're just feeling stretched and you're not feeling like you're engaged in anything full force. So I really had to get honest with myself, do some work to figure out where my priorities lie, and make sure that my calendar was matching where my true priorities are. My family, my faith, and taking care of my own self too, walking the talk that I was helping others do. And, building the business the way that it was going to be sustainable and fit in with my strengths. And then, of course, those social pieces. It kind of turned some of those facets around, because before my business, probably social was up there in that piece of where the business went. And for me, I had to get really mindful about, what I wanted to do and what I was doing. And some of those relationships and priorities really had to shift.
Yeah, my answer to this might be, I don't know, see how this lands, because the thing that came to my mind is the idea of overextending. If we think about that word, what does that mean? That means going outside of ourselves. We're extending our efforts, our time, our passion, our whatever, outside of our ability. And I don't mean the self beyond the self that Paul Tillich talks about. That's great. That's trying to go a little bit beyond what I think I'm capable of. Overextending, I think there's something to, I'm no longer being who I am. I'm trying to be Lee. I'm trying to be Susie. I'm trying to be, and that's, I think, when overextending really starts blowing fire at us, the dragon. I loved what we were doing. Still do. And we can talk about that later in terms of what sustainability is today. But yes, I was tired. Yes, I was maybe a little bit too emotionally involved with it being identity, which that's not always a good thing. It's never a good thing. But I so much felt like it was an extension of who I was and who Susanna and I were as a couple and a family. I don't look back on it and remember being exhausted. I don't look back on it and remember being burned out. I don't look back on it with this idea of overextending, because I just felt like, oh my gosh, like this is who we are. And the world is saying this matters, and we are going to pay you enough to pay your mortgage to be you and to have this team of people that gets to be them. And so I don't know. I don't want to sugarcoat it, because running your business, folks, is exhausting. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it's priorities. Yes, it's sacrifices. Yes, it's all these things. But wow, when you're being you and you're making a difference in the world, your ability to work the longer hours I don't know. Again, I don't want to be Pollyannish here, because it's very easy for me 20 years in to look back and say, oh, it was great. It wasn't always great. It was really hard at times. But I was just thinking about that word overextend, and I think that's a good question for us to ask. Am I overextending, or am I simply not sleeping? Am I simply not eating? Am I simply not staying active? Am I simply losing touch with my community? Those are different questions. Overextending is not being me anymore. And that turns into burnout really fast.
Yes. And I love that you defined that overextending a bit more. And it's like a hybrid, I would say, Susie, of what you mentioned with getting really honest with yourself on your calendar and what's important to you about business and your values in personal and professional, life. And also, Brad, you mentioned like having your values truly align with your purpose and fulfillment in business. And are you sure we can't be you with that? Because I do feel like, think about overextending. And Brad, you brought up a good point at the end of like doing a little gut check of like, are you overextending, or are you not sleeping? Are you not eating until 3 p.m.? Are you not drinking water at all? Have you not moved your body and sat in front of a computer for 8 hours? I will say that when I think of overextension, I do think of times when I took on too much, so much so that those things I did compromise on I would say, sleep more than anything. And I wouldn't say it was a choice, right? And I noticed that like I just took on too much. So like an example was like, gosh, probably 3 years ago, I had several independent contracts. I was doing like women's wellness retreats. I was doing events in the community. I was saying yes to like everything, which I want to be careful about that, because, I think there's that fine line of saying yes and the whole no thing and boundaries. But I noticed I did overextend, because I was looking at my calendar and I was like, I don't have time. Like, not that I don't have time, but I was like, I don't have the energy, capacity, availability for social connection with my friends, for like my nice, 45 minutes I want to walk my dog, because there was that competition to see through what I had committed to. And I think that that's like the overextension piece of like, okay, this isn't sustainable. And what is most important to me about the contracts or the business I'm working on that brings me most fulfillment? And then I narrowed it down. But it was important to me, right, to see things through and show up for what I said I was going to show up for. You put yourself in that position. But yeah, it's hard when you've got also a value with like your work and showing up for others, but then it's the compromise of your own well-being.
And this is way too much detail. There's something that I utilize called the legacy matrix, and it's got 4 quadrants, your typical 4-quadrant thing. And one of the points is there's a time to grind. So in your business, you may go through a 6-month period where you're working huge hours and you are not having as much community time, but it's intentional grinding, not default grinding. Default grinding leads to burnout. Intentional grinding is for a specific period. We did Race Across America bike race a long time ago, actually now, 10 years ago. And you're not in that race saying, well, did I get my sleep today like I want to? Am I connecting with my community? No, you put your head down and you ride for 24 hours for 7 days straight to get from San Diego, California to Annapolis, Maryland as fast as you possibly can. That's purposeful, but you don't do that for 3 months. And same thing with your business. You're going to have periods, and it might be 90 days. It might be 30 days. It might be a week. It might be a weekend. It might, whatever, but it's intentional. You go into it saying, I'm doing this. Here's why I'm doing this. This is the outcome I expect. This is how I'm measuring my progress. And I'm not planning to do this long term. Default grinding is when you just find yourself overwhelmed and you're like, how did I get here? What is happening? Those are completely different things. And I think it ties nicely into what we're talking about.
I love that you went through that and the whole grinding piece. I would be so curious to see, just as I'm hearing our different perspectives, how is the overextending, how does it look different for men and women? How does it look different for folks that have come from maybe a corporate job and they're transitioning into health and wellness coaching? That would be interesting to see.
Well, I
agree.
I'd lean into the concept that stress kicks in when there's a change in your baseline. Let's use running for an example, because that's an easy one. If you go out and run 10 miles today, is that too much? Is that too little? Is that too easy? Is that ridiculous? We can't answer that without knowing the person. Without knowing the pay. So it's the change. If you come from a situation, I was in a healthcare executive type role. So I was used to working 60-hour weeks. 60 hours was the baseline. It was the established, our family was used to that schedule. Suddenly I'm not commuting. So now I have more time with the family with the same number of hours of working. So it's that change. So consider where you're coming from as you develop your new strategy, and note that the stress is not generally, there's exceptions to this when it's too much and when you limit your cornerstones, move, fuel, rest, connect, but let's assume those are all in place. It's the change from your baseline that causes the unsustainable stress. It's not the number. It's not the miles. It's not the hours. It's the change from what you had at your baseline.
Good point. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Coming from just, what your norm is and what you're building and what your desires are. Yeah. That's a really good point, Brad.
Brad, how would you say you made that distinction? Because I'm thinking about like the people listening that are like, okay, if I'm coming from a corporate world to doing this thing on my own, one thing I hear is like, I don't have any routine anymore. Like, I don't know how to organize my day. I've said yes to all of these commitments and I don't know what I'm doing. And so I am curious, like, what helped you get there to having that distinction, maybe between the grinds, or that could offer a coach like this kind of reflective opportunity to ask themselves, like those questions that we're kind of talking about, of like an analysis of where I've been, where am I going, where am I at now, kind of thing.
I'll give you an easy starting point, and then maybe we can dig into this later in a future podcast. But I mentioned the legacy matrix before. If you can visually picture the 4 quadrants, up in the top right is the catalyst. You're being a catalyst. The top left is the dreamer. The bottom right is the grinder. The bottom left, so the catty corner from the catalyst, is the settler. All of those quadrants have value at certain times in your day, your week, your month, your life, etc. But remember, and folks, we're like, hell, they keep talking about catalysts because they like their name. No, we picked our name because what it means. A catalyst is someone who's having an impact, making a difference, creating positive change, and not being used up in the process. A catalyst in a chemistry lab, a catalyst creates positive change, but is not used up. That's why we picked the name. If you feel like you're burned out, you're not being a catalyst anymore. You're in the grinder mode. You're in the settler mode. You're in a quadrant. You're in the dreamer quadrant. And so one of the distinctions I try to encourage people to do is when you're feeling burned out, you consider what's missing. The legacy matrix gives you the answer. if you lose the upward aim, if you forget your heart, if you forget what brought you here, if you forget what you're here on earth to do, and you're simply grinding it out, of course you're going to burn out. By the same token, if you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs, sitting on a mountainside saying, oh, I have all these great ideas and brainstorms and all that kind of stuff, then you're a knucklehead. Like, there's a place for that. That's what a retreat is. But if we're not then moving forward, we're not doing anything with it. And so all that to say, fill your gaps. If you're a dreamer, if you have great ideas, if you have all these structure, concepts that you're like, oh, we could do this and this and this, great. Then put structure in place to do one of those things. A very simple way to do that. There was something that was super popular, I don't know, a decade ago or something. It's like 100-day journal process. And you literally just go in every single day without exception, and you write down, what is my outcome I'm looking to create today? Every single day. Like, that makes sense for about 15 days. But by the time you get to 87 days, you're about to go bonkers, although you're not. Because all of a sudden you realize this structure that I was lacking in my business is now natural. I've now created the structure. I've now realized when I get started at 6 a.m. and I put 2 good hours in and then I go work out instead of twiddling my thumbs, drinking my coffee, checking my social media, texting a couple friends, now realizing oh man, it's 9:30. I haven't done anything yet. I got to get going. Like, what are your gaps? I have gaps. You have gaps. How do we fill those gaps with the things that allow us to live that out? So that was a long soapbox, but hopefully there's something in there for people.
I love it. And I have a follow-up question of how, like, that's the system, Brad, that you maybe have integrated to provide this kind of sustainability of checking in and saying, okay, what are the gaps? How can I make adjustments? Would you say that that's true in like a systematic approach to finding this structure and balance for yourself?
So you're asking, do I have a system that makes sure those things are in place, or
would you say that, like you mentioned the 100-day journal, you mentioned kind of this check-in of the quadrants or like of where the gaps are. And I'm curious if that's the system that you go to, or if a system has been developed that's supported these areas of like your health and business and the way you're approaching life.
Yeah, if Susanna were listening to this, she would roll her eyes and say, the guy comes up with a new system every 3.5 weeks. And that's my system. That's the interesting thing is I don't like the same system over and over. That 100-day thing it worked, but I didn't go back to it. But I know for me, a new system once every quarter or so is a good way to go. Everybody else is different. Other people may say, oh, I have my checklist. I have my to-do list. I have my, again, Susanna's going to roll her eyes at all kinds of stuff here. When we first got married, I had a checklist of all the goals I had for the year on a spreadsheet, on our mirror, in our bathroom, so that each night I could check off these things to say, did I, and so I know everyone listens going, this guy is a knucklehead. How does he exist? I don't do that anymore. That's not a thing for me. But at the time, it worked great. I was dialed in.
Yeah. I'm hearing your perspective of systems change, and that's
my system.
You. Yes. Susie, what would you say are maybe your systems or boundaries or things that have improved that kind of?
Yeah. So all in that area, again, one of my big growth things was being a business owner and shifting that. And so with that, I had to change. One of the biggest things I had to learn how to do was time management and be on time. That was something that plagued me for a lot of my life. And I can say I have overcome that. I love it now. I'm early to things. But scheduling was really important to me, and just getting my head wrapped around, what is it? What's the structure? Like, what am I trying to get done? Having a morning routine is so huge. I love the idea of this 100-day journal. And I think for me, it's a gratitude journal. that just is centering in a devotional and affirmations. Like my morning has got to do that, and there's got to be some movement in there. But that is just very purposeful for me of getting me in the right mindset. But so scheduling is, I would say, the theme that is my system that is important. One of the things that had to shift for me too, or I don't know if it had to shift so much as this is just something that is important for me to do, is to put boundaries around social media and all of the just things that bombard us. So using the do not disturb, using the different timers, being very mindful about those kinds of activities is like huge.
How would you say that those boundaries and the morning routine and time management have impacted your well-being along the way?
I would say, well, the boundaries on social media is just a major, I get to decide what is going to be the inputs into my day, and especially the earlier part of my day. So what has been the impact on my well-being is I feel confident. I feel good about myself. I feel good about what I'm up to. I feel in control. Not that it's a perfect thing. I think on those vacations, I know during the holidays where it feels like this 2-week kind of period, it's always a little bit of a heavy lift to get back into it for me personally. But I feel better that way. I feel productive and getting after it.
There's something to that energy when we find the things that help us feel energized. And then we're like, okay, we can take on this HR issue. We can approach social media with intention. And it doesn't feel particularly draining, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's one of the things that as business owners is false in the social media world, that, oh, you have total freedom, follow your heart, it'll all work out. That's not what they mean. I mean, not the ones that know what they're talking about. Follow your heart means be who you are, but don't be structureless. That's not running a business. Running a business isn't floating through and going, oh, this is just going to be so great, and it's just going to naturally happen, and money's going to come into my life. Sorry, folks. I hate to pop that balloon. You got to combine the two. You've got to create. I run into so many people, and this is people in retirement or approaching retirement and business owners who they have total freedom all of a sudden and no structure. And that doesn't create outcomes. The freedom's fun. It only sustains itself when you create the structure that allows it to continue. So, yeah, we got to get them both.
I love that you bring that up, because there is a balance between structure and flexibility that provides that sustainability. But we can't just kind of say things are going to manifest for us, right? Like there's got to be some intention behind it.
Right.
Knowing, the experience that you both have, if you were to build businesses again from scratch, so like Susie, I would say the perspective of like the coaching business and like the cooking, and then Brad with more of like the growing a larger, maybe corporate wellness. And then with Catalyst, what would you do differently to protect your energy, sustainability, structure, maybe?
I think I would definitely build in the structure of that recovery piece so that I was feeling balanced. So just having a structure where it includes the piece of building me and the development piece. I have, through my career in this, just really had to spend time and focus on development of myself and my skills and my knowledge. And I think I didn't realize that at the beginning. I just thought, okay, I'm going to put the effort in, and then I'm going to have a business, and I'm going to make money, and I'm going to help people and all the things. But there was actually all these pieces in the background that were really important. And I think if I were to, be starting a new business or something like that, it'd be much more intentional around all those different pieces.
Lee, I think the major change I would make would be to jump into the retreat. So we've been doing this about 20 years. And Suzanne and I, for the last 10 years, have been getting away, no technology, no TV, no, like just the two of us to talk about. And we're in a unique situation because we're married, we're parents, and we're running a business together. And that's that's a triathlon. Some people are like, no, thank you. That's insane. It's worked really well for us, but it's worked much better since we've been more intentional about saying, let's take a 2-3 day period once a year, get away from all the distractions and talk through our marriage, talk through our finances, talk through our business, talk through what we're trying to do to support our kids, because it makes you think you're on the same page. You're like, we live together 24/7. Of course we're on. No, you're probably not. And when you get away from all the distractions and you have those conversations and the freedom is there to say, I think we need to tweak this. Not just the freedom, the purpose of the weekend is to bring those things up. So I would say that personal retreat with Susanna, had we started that 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years earlier, and our kids were young at that time, so that's why we didn't. But the value of doing that has been immense. And so just as an individual, maybe it's just you, but get away for that purpose of really thinking through and looking at all your structures and considering, am I following my heart without being silly about the social media version of that? Do I have the structure in place? Am I getting into debt? Those kinds of things that will allow you to sustain what you're doing are so valuable.
You all both brought up this idea of restoration and, having time for reflection. And I want to circle back to that. And before that, I want to add one thing I was thinking about when it comes to if I were to do it all over again. I was thinking about the business plan. I'm putting air quotes, this business plan I created in a Word document. I went to the Small Business Center and I'm thinking back and I had all these ideas for how I wanted the business to look. And my health was not a part of that. And I wonder now, I wonder if it was always, I thought about it, I'm like, am I going to exercise? Am I going to do this? But it wasn't, I would say, as intentional. I kind of de facto thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And things are just going to kind of be in rhythm, which I learned quickly that that's not the case. And I made adjustments. But what would happen if we put that into the plan from the get-go of restorative time? Or, okay, I want to do retreats, one-on-one coaching, community events. How am I going to protect my time? Here's the part of the plan that's going to help me protect my personal time or my energy. And so I feel if I were to do it again, I'd put my health and well-being in the plan. I'd be this is probably the most important part of the plan to allow me to do all these other things. How would you?
That should be part of every business plan. That should be part of just, and I love the companies that take their employee, that provide coaching for their employees. I feel they're putting this big bow around that piece of it, that your health is important.
Well, and every time we talk about vision, those of you who have read any of my stuff, you're like, Brad, we know. But it's about the who am I, not the what am I doing. Once you're crystal clear on the vision of the person you're becoming, the goals achieve themselves. You don't need discipline. You don't need motivation because it's simply an outpouring of who you are. And so I think if that business plan is built as a subsidiary of the person you're becoming, instead of the person you're becoming being a subsidiary of the business that's being built, everything changes.
Yes. If I knew that back then, I wonder where I'd be now. So another plug is if you go to the retreat and you come to our business sessions, I feel this is a crash course in the three of us and how we're going to approach this conversation. Ding, ding.
Well, and that is a good reminder. It is going to be the three of us, gang. So you're going to have the three of us concentrated time for about 2 hours, and we're excited about it. We'll see how it goes, if there's a value for those of you who are listening. But this is the kind of thing that we're going to be talking through.
Yes. Before moving on to this idea of success and productivity, which is I would say a big component of our connection to business and how we approach things, I do want to circle back to this idea of recovery. Because Susie, you brought up recovery and building that into the schedule, and Brad talked about kind of this retreat idea. that, you know, he and Susanna go off and kind of have an intentional approach to that weekend. They're not just like going into the mountains and looking at the elk for the weekend. They've got plans of how they want to spend their time. How would you all define like what is success in those moments, would you say, or how you define
success
recovery?
in recovery?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really good question. And it's nice to drill down into that because it's like, okay, recovery, what is that? For me, I think everybody is different. I think everybody's got those 2 or 3 different things that they know. Like for me, if I don't, I mean, consistently, obviously, I don't do Race Across America, but if I, you know, in my day-to-day life, I've got to have sleep, I've got to have my nutrition going good, and I've got to be moving my body. And if I'm not doing those things, if those things aren't happening, for me, my productivity is not there. My focus is not there. So let me switch it to the positive and say that it's really important for me to build into my schedule the structure where I'm going to be able to take care of myself in those categories. Now, for other people, it might be something different, but those are the key ones for me that they have to make it on the calendar. They're just part of my calendar. They're built in.
Yeah,
So that's like sustainable recovery, like recovery over the over the course of a day versus like what we sometimes think of recovery as like, okay, I've, you know, gone a week and I'm like, you know, preparing for a marathon. I am not a marathon runner. That was the example that came to my mind, but preparing for a marathon. And then there's like recovery built in, like post fact. I'm hearing, Susie, like you're building in recovery for sustainability integrated into your calendar. So it's pockets of it, not just one piece.
That's a really good point to remember, though, because there's the after a big day, you know, where you've had 10 coaching calls. What are you going to do? If you don't recover, then you're going to get drained. And then that's not going to help anybody. So the piece of that is just I think the awareness, that would be a good one to bring up when we were talking about things that surprised you. I wasn't surprised that I would get kind of that compassion fatigue type thing. And you have to be aware of those things. So recover, mindfulness, for me, it's get out in nature. I'm in Colorado, so it's very easy to do that most days of the year. But yeah, important to recover after the actual work as well.
And your example of the marathon, Lee, you're not recovering just after the marathon's over. You've got recovery built into every single week of training. You don't go all in. You create it so you're doing your tempo work on this day, and then the next day might be an easy bike ride to let the legs loosen up, and then you come back for a long run on Friday. So yeah, it's a good analogy. I would answer the question by saying, am I being a catalyst? Our little matrix we were talking about before, if I'm not moving things forward, if I'm not helping create positive change in the world and in my community, et cetera, or if I'm just grinding it out, neither one of those are who I'm designed to be. I'm designed to be a catalyst. If I'm simply a dreamer, if I'm simply grinding, if I'm simply sitting back on the couch, those are fine. All 3 of those are good places to be when it's intentional and it's short term. None of those are a good place to live.
Mm. Man, I could go so many different directions. I'm thinking about recovery and longevity. So the top of mind is, how do you honor your recovery? So I was thinking about, Susie, you brought up, like, if you have a hard day and or a long day, well, maybe long day, you're working longer hours, you're building in maybe that recovery the next day. And then Brad was talking about how recovery is built in to like a training program, right? Like if we're thinking about exercise, for example. And I was thinking about, like, in my exercise plan, it gives me like recovery days. And then I was thinking, like, do I actually take advantage of those recovery days? Like, do I actually listen to that, or like listen or honor what I'm trying to hold space for myself? And so I am curious how you all honor that. Like, if you're like, okay, I've got 10 coaching calls tomorrow, I want to have a lighter day, but then maybe like something comes up or someone asks, to connect, or how do you like protect that time? Because I feel like that is hard, because we ultimately, want what's best for ourselves and our health and our business. Right. And I think sometimes there's a challenge with honoring those different quadrants for ourselves and staying true to what we say we're going to do to support our sustainability.
I think in the last, maybe it was the last podcast where Brad was talking about that's a really important piece to factor in when you are thinking about like what you're going to charge. We were talking about, fee structures, because you might be talking to somebody for 30 minutes, but you have got to have the time to write your notes, to, decompress, to get yourself back and recover after that. So to me, your question sort of is reminiscent of that conversation that we had there. That is an absolutely integral part to think about when you are thinking about your schedule. And I think when I felt overextended, when we were talking about that and I was feeling overextended, part of that was because, okay, I have all these things on my calendar. It should all work out. Why am I so burnt out, or maybe not burnt out, but just drained? And like, why is this not working for me? So building in the recovery, whatever that's, maybe you need to find out what that is for you. Maybe it is going for a walk, maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's whatever it might be. Those are just some of my thoughts on that topic.
Okay, so I jotted a few things down here. You had primed the pump with us earlier about the exhaustion piece. What would you suggest for somebody that's feeling exhausted, or we're talking about burned out per se? I would say the first step. Well, first of all, we were talking about marathon training. The thing that all runners know but don't do, and might be fascinating to our audience, regardless of whether you ever want to even look at running shoes, is average or worse than average runners go too hard on their easy days and too easy on their hard days. That is not new. Any runner out there is just nodding their head and going, yeah, I've heard that 1,000 times. But think about that in the context of your business. The best business owners, the best folks in this arena are going really hard when it's time to go really hard, and they know when to back off to be able to sustain that. So keep that analogy in place as I'm talking through this next couple things. The next piece is honor your recovery with honesty. We lie to ourselves constantly. We want to blame someone that's not us. So I'm burned out because of fill in the blank. My clients are too needy. I, got asked to do too many things. Nobody was nice to me in my training. Whatever. The real thing is we were swiping social media till midnight and we didn't get the sleep we needed, and that's why we're not burned out. We're sleepy. We're not grinding too much. We're not working too hard. We're not spending time in the sunshine. We're not connecting with the people important to us. We're not eating good. Like the stuff, I'm talking to health and wellness coaches, for goodness sake. We know the answers. That doesn't mean we do it. So honor your recovery with honesty. Take a little time to say, am I sleeping well? Before I blame someone else or whine about my life or complain about my business doesn't take off or, assume it's just not the right time or I'm in the wrong place or if I just lived in this other place or had this better support, stop externalizing it and start, maybe it is external, but start internal. Start with honesty and say, how's my sleep? Look at the cornerstones. How's my sleep? How's my feeling? How's my activity level? How are my connections? Okay, those are all really good. Okay, so now we know it's not those. Or wait a minute, those aren't so good if I'm really being honest. So let's correct that one first. Now, if all those are good, now am I using my time wisely? Am I assuming that the world's just going to knock on my door and say, here's your golden ticket and here's your... No, it's not going to happen. So look at your day honestly and say, okay, I'm up at 5:30 a.m. and I want to shut things down at 6:30 p.m. All right, that's 13 hours. What did I do in that I didn't get much done in 13 hours. Well, what am I doing? Oh, I'm on social media more than I realized. Oh, I took a really long lunch. Oh, I was talking to my dog. Oh, let's be honest. So move, feel, rest, connect. Now schedule. I'm spending 13 hours a day, in quotes, working. What happened in that 13 hours? About 2.5 hours worth of work. Maybe that's the problem. So we honor our recovery with honesty initially. Now, after that, maybe there's a different piece that needs to be put in place, but start there.
I like that. Honoring your recovery with honesty.
Yeah.
That's bold.
Sorry, buddy.
I feel like almost tough love sometimes, right? I mean,
Exactly.
It's totally tough love. Yeah.
particularly like we're talking about this, in our experience and like what we've found success in, I would say, with giving ourselves like these gut checks. It's not always easy to do that, right? And like to even pause and self-reflect on like, what is causing this? Like the cause and effect of what's causing this, what's causing me to feel this way. And Brad, you brought up productivity, I would say a little bit in when you were outlining your day of like, am I scrolling on Instagram? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? How would you define productivity or like in a day now compared to maybe like what's out there and like industry standards of productivity or like what people might imagine to be productive throughout the day? How do you define productive day?
I mean, in the end, productivity is outcome, right? And if we tried to create an equation, maybe we'd say input divided by outcome. So if you put 2 hours in and you create this much revenue or this much in terms of new clients or new opportunities or warm potential clients, that kind of thing. But you always hear about KPIs, key performance indicators. Those are different for everyone, but they're not non-existent for anyone. Like we all need. So for your fitness training, you know what your KPIs are. Maybe it's number of times a week. Maybe it's your HRV level each morning. Maybe it's a 5K finish time. So that's a fitness KPI. What's your business KPI? Is it number of clients? Is it number of conversations? Is it and I would caution people to try to pick KPIs that are within your sphere of influence. So new clients are not in your sphere of influence. Discussions are in your sphere of influence. Meetings are in your sphere of influence. Connections are in your. So try to pick KPIs that, I mean, it's fun. And if you join any business groups, which I'd highly encourage, I've done many of those over the years where you get together, as Susie said, with, 4 or 5 other business owners and you're sharing KPIs and you're sharing accountability and you're sharing structure and you're sharing honesty and these kinds of things. So those are great. But for you, what are your controllable KPIs? What is something that you can say, if I'm going to spend 13 hours today working, what is my outcome that I expect from this day? It's not number of clients. That's our hope down the road. We know that, and by the way, that's a leading indicator. If you have X number of calls, X number of meetings, X number of networking opportunities, X number of webinars presented, X number of speaking engagements, X number of et cetera, we know, or you will know over time, those lead to X clients. It's not a linear, it's not an automatic trend line, but if it leads to 0, we're measuring the wrong things.
Or doing the wrong things, maybe going to the wrong groups.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when we first started, I'd go to any meeting where people would talk to me. I went to everything. And then you start realizing that one was a total waste of time. And so then you start to narrow it, and then you narrow it further. And then you realize what matters and what doesn't. And it's different for all of us.
Oh, yeah, that is true. I love the equation of the productivity equation. I think for me, productivity is a blend between at this point in my business, I have an established clientele. So a big part of my productivity is doing the work. Another really important part of my productivity is drumming up the next set of work. So that is creating the content and doing the reach outs and doing the networking. And in that way of measuring the outcome, so there's the measuring the outcome of the work, which I think it's important to be reflective on. it's also important for me, at least, to focus on the action steps of that other piece that's a little bit unknown. So for me, it's making sure that I'm attending the things that have committed to attending, and doing the reach outs and creating the content and doing the posting and things like that. Productivity is not scrolling on social media and finding a click funnel that is going to solve all your problems.
What?
No.
Heresy, Susie, heresy.
I think this is such a great conversation around productivity, because we all, I think, have a different perspective on what productivity is, and it can feel a little elusive when we don't feel like we have a clear path. So I love that Brad brought up kind of this quantitative almost approach to productivity and measuring outcomes, and then this idea of action steps that support those things and doing what you say you're going to do. And I feel like there's this idea too of finding the right things. Yes, you can go to all of the events, but then it's okay not to go back to all of the same events that aren't ultimately tying to the outcome that you are wanting, right? I think that there's value in that. It's not, I would say, quantitatively, maybe, if we've got 30 things on the calendar, that may not measure our productivity as much as we think it might, being busier versus having or finding
productivity
quality.
Is not busyness.
Ooh, yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
It's the busyness versus intentional exploration is what I'm hearing of yes, try those things. Yeah. Then check back with values, your performance indicators, what's important to you about business. If that's not in alignment, that's okay. Right. But the busyness piece, I think, is what people get stuck on. And then it leads them to this whole cycle. And this rabbit hole of I'm not good enough, but I'm doing all these things, right?
Yes.
The busyness piece.
I think also with that, because we're talking about the nitty gritty of really these productivity and these big themes here and these big concepts. Ultimately, productivity is taking steps and moving forward. And if you get really stuck where you're just maybe lost or who knows what that might be, what's the next step? What is a step I can take that's going to move me forward?
But forward is the key to that. I love that, Susie.
Yes,
but
forward.
But that's the difference between busyness and productive. Busyness is not a move forward. Busyness is just a move. Productive is a movement forward in the direction of my personal vision, the direction of my company. So that's a critical distinction you made there.
Mm-hmm. And based on this idea of productivity that moves the needle forward, what's a recommendation you'd give people in business or coaches who are in the coaching business, recommendation around structure that can help support maybe some of these themes we've talked about, like productivity or structure or cornerstones? What would you say would be your recommendation to them?
Structural recommendation I would recommend. I don't know that I have a clear answer to this, to tell you the truth. I wish, I don't know if I wish I did or not, because I like the way things are going. A couple of systems that have definitely been helpful to me, and not the only systems, but systems that are very consistent for me, is one, an accounting system and keeping track of my expenses, where the money is coming from and where it's going. Because ultimately, we're not building a hobby, we're, creating a business and we're making income. The other one is that calendar system, whatever that is for you. For me, it's a paper calendar and my electronic calendar. And those are systems that are just I feel like they're my friends. I oftentimes talk about sugar, carbs, and that carbs need their friends with them. They need protein and they need fat to go along with them. And so I feel like going along, my friends in business are my accounting system and my scheduling system.
Huge. almost everybody's heard of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He's famous for his big rocks analogy, where he takes this big jar and he puts sand in there and then pebbles and then mid-sized rocks. And then the big rocks are sitting there, and he asks the audience, like, what do I do with these? And they're like, well, you don't have room for them. He goes, bummer. Okay, you're right. So he starts over with a new jar, and he puts the big rocks in first. And then he puts in the medium-sized rocks, and there's plenty of room. And now he puts in the gravel, and there's plenty of room. And now he puts in the sand, and there's plenty of room. And now he can even add water because he put the big rocks in first. What are your big rocks? As you look, I love Susie's calendar. Folks, if you say, I don't do well with the calendar, let's go back to that honesty question. Are you really doing well without a calendar? Let's answer that. Now, maybe some of you are. Maybe it's just flowing, man. It just does its thing and it just happens. But for most of us, we need some kind of a system that tracks our day and where we're going to do things and how it's going to work and where we're going to put the big rocks that have the biggest impact. Because once you put those big rocks in, almost always, everything else will fit around those.
I love that. And I like the visuals that we've given, I think, throughout this episode of like the cornerstones and the rocks and having space and then being able to fill other pieces and doing it in an intentional way. When I think about structural recommendations, I go to like boundaries. That's where my brain goes, of like structure around like calendar, like you mentioned, Susie. But most importantly, I think, we haven't talked much about location in our work. And I think in the coaching business space, a lot of it can be remote work, or like you're going out into the community. You might not have like a dedicated office somewhere else. And that can blend a lot of things when your home is also your place of work. And so I would say structure for me looks like having space where I hold true most of the time to where I'm doing my work. Like occasionally the computer makes its way down to the couch, or like very seldomly now it might make its way into the bedroom when I'm sitting and I'm finishing out an email or two. That looks a lot different than it did 2 years ago. Like I would say structure for me is like being in my workspace and not letting that bleed into the other areas that then, blend family and work. And then it makes it harder for me to make that distinction between my family time and my personal time. So structure for me looks like laptop staying in the office. Because once it's out of the office,
good. Yes.
Else, is like, I can send this email 3 hours later. My husband's like, hey, when are we making dinner? Or like, hey, we were supposed to watch that baseball game. And because there's always work to be done, right? We've got to have, I think, that structure and that foundation to have that disconnect, in my opinion, when I think of structure.
It's a great point, and I would add alarms to that, because if I do choose to, let's say, sit outside and work some, no, you can't do that. No, but I'm going to do that for 40 minutes or whatever. So I'm constantly using alarms and saying, okay, I'm going to work on this for this period of time, because you're right, Lee. A quick, I'm just going to do this real quick. Really funny. Because it just bleeds into the next thing. There's always something. Always. Yes. You will never catch up on your email. I promise you, you hope you don't, because if you catch up on your email, your business is gone. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And I do want to note that I do take my computer outside. I think I'm thinking about like the places where other things in my life are kind of happening, sure, especially like family space. Yeah. And I like the idea of a alarm too. Coming back to well-being, what would you all say is like a personal practice that has protected your well-being and health?
I wish I could. This might be a fun thing to do on a social media post, actually, but I would love to take a camera around my office, because my office is totally set up for my well-being. I've got my walking pad with my stand-up desk. I've got my vibration plate behind me with weights. I've got my yoga mat, and being in Colorado is just a wonderful way to be able to, I can take calls outside. So that is super important. But yeah, the practicing those cornerstones, like I know we've hit on that in this. The only other addition to that is that I I have a great value in having a health and wellness coach myself. So that is a huge resource for me to stay accountability to my own health and wellness. And so that's just a really big thing. And if you don't have, if you're in the health and wellness field and you don't have a health and wellness coach, I know there's people that need practice that you could connect with on that Facebook group and everything. But yeah, just having a system like that, maybe outside of yourself, can be really helpful too.
Great point. And I do as well. I've had a health and wellness coach consistently for over a decade. So that's a great reminder. Two things. One that's helped me a ton over the years, because I don't know, it's maybe how I was raised or something, like a guilt to go do these workouts or go for a walk or whatever. And a few years ago, I realized if I call it a meeting, now listen, folks, no one's looking at my calendar. I'm not reporting to anyone. Susanna could care less. But if for myself, I call it a meeting, good to go. Let's jump on the bike. Let's do our thing. That's a meeting with Brad. So I don't know if that'll help anybody else out there, but I've just found when I make my fitness activities a meeting on my calendar, essentially, I'm like, okay, cool. And now it's scheduled and I stick to it and I treat it like any other meeting. I wouldn't skip a meeting with Susie. I wouldn't skip a meeting with Lee. I'm not going to skip a meeting with the treadmill or whatever it might be. So that's one of them. And then I have been trying. So again, this is year 20. I turned 60 here in a couple months. I've been trying to get off of the hours treadmill and work less hours than I was 15 years ago, 10 years ago, et cetera. And I keep failing. And I've tried. I'm like, I'm going to take Fridays off. No, you're not. Okay, I'm going to take Friday afternoons off. No, you're not. So I keep trying all these things and and I have the freedom to do this now. Our company's in a place where I don't need to be putting in the huge hours. And yet I kept finding myself. So I have started not taking meetings until 10 a.m. And that's worked really, really well. It doesn't mean I'm not working before 10 a.m., but it allows me the freedom to journal extra long that morning, or to read something I'm really into, or to go for that longer run, or whatever it might be. And that we'll see. Again, we change systems every 6 weeks, right, everybody? But at this moment, that is working really well. I don't take any meetings until 10 a.m., and that allows much more of a flowing process for that super valuable time in the morning, because I wake up between 5 and 5:30 every morning. So it's a really valuable 4.5 hours to invest it in the things that matter most before the world takes over.
That's an awesome creative way to just you experimented with all these things.
It didn't work.
Like you coached yourself, or maybe your coach helped you with that as well. But yeah, that's really cool.
Brad, I'll say that I have developed something similar, I would say, in the morning. It is easier being in Eastern time when you work with a company who's in Mountain time. Yep. So my morning time is more protected. So caveat there is, this is obviously, these are our individual experiences with this, and everyone's got different schedules or availabilities with that. But I also recommend having time in the morning. Like I have a non-negotiable, unless it's pouring rain out, that I take my dog, Bernie, for a walk in the morning. That's our thing. And I've incorporated other pieces to that along the way. So now I take my phone with me in case something happens in the neighborhood, or just as like a safety mechanism per se, but I'm not on it as much as I used to be. Like I used to go for the walk and I'd like check email and I'd like take a quick look at something or two. And then I'd find myself still in a flurry when I got back, even though I had more time for myself in the morning, because I was already putting myself into that zone. So I would say the practice that helps me feel most focus and clarity throughout the day is the morning walk, very limited phone use on that walk. And I also find that I'm more creative on that walk in my brain. Like I come back and I've got like fun ideas, but they're not leading to almost a stress or a flurry of, oh, I need to get back to that email quick, or, oh, that interesting thing on the news, or, oh, like my brain feels more creative in a positive way. So the morning has been great for me.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So as we wrap up, a few things I would say that are top of mind are, we've talked about sustainability, our well-being, protecting our time, a little bit about longevity, I would say, that aligns with sustainability. So in closing, I think it would be great to maybe touch on what sustainability and longevity of a coaching business or business in the health space looks to you now or means to you now. And what would be one recommendation for a coach or business owner listening to this episode?
They might be two different questions. So I'll answer
two questions.
Two things here. One, what would I recommend? And two, kind of how am I approaching it going forward? Is that what we?
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
so
I would say
what I recommend is, folks, watch your money and your heart very, very closely. And you're like, Brad, those are two opposite things. Like, what do you mean watch your money and your heart? If you're in debt, if you're building your business on credit cards, you're not going to make it. It's going to, the reaper comes calling, folks. Like it's not sustainable. That's a made up thing in Palo Alto, California, where the venture capitalist comes in with $400 million in the end. That's not the type of business we're building. We need to build it on firm foundations. And one of those firm foundations is spending less than we're earning. And if we continue to do that over time, it's going to be fine. One of the mistakes that we almost made very early on was buying a building. We didn't, but I wanted to. I'm like, we're growing. It's going really well. We can have a place for our coaches, meetings. And had we bought that building, we would not exist as a company now because we couldn't have sustained. You go through ups and downs. We've been so fortunate. And as fortunate as we've been over 20 years, we've had some really hard years where we barely made it, or we've pulled into our personal savings probably 5 of those 20 years to pay our expenses, our daily expense. So don't kid yourself. Don't get on one of these, oh, it's going to be great. You can't shrink your way to greatness. No, you can't shrink your way to greatness, but you can't borrow your way to greatness either. That's a big expense. So I would say watch that. And then in combination with your heart, make sure it's you. Be you. Like I talked about that early on. I just felt like it's easy to work a 60-hour week when you're being who you are. It's really hard to work a 10-hour week when you're trying to be someone else. So balancing those things out appropriately and not losing sight of either one, hugely valuable. And I can expand more on the other one, but Susie, what do you think on this? Because I think we kind of need to tie a ribbon on this, baby.
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple of things. One is taking my business seriously. It's excellent. Not as hard now because it's more established. Doesn't mean that I've arrived or anything like that. But gosh, there were so many times in the past that I could have just listened to the other voices out there in the noise and just really kind of gone a different direction and just not done it. And I'm so thankful that I stayed the course, and I'm so thankful for the trajectory that I'm on now. And having said that, the important to keep it sustainable in this field of health and wellness, it is always changing. So of course, there's going to be these cornerstone business things as well as your health things that are always going to be the same and always going to be important. But it's really important to stay aligned and stay in community with what's going on, what the market's telling you, what people want, and just keep moving, aligning with your strengths in that as well, not trying to, like you said, like be true to yourself and make smart moves that are going to be needed out there in the marketplace.
Susie, that's huge. Two things you said that I want to put an exclamation point on for folks. Take your business seriously. That sounds so simple. You're like, oh yeah, take your business seriously. I do that. Do you? Like that is such a powerful statement, Susie. I love that. That if people will just ignore everything else we said today, but listen to what Susie said. Take your business seriously. That will change your trajectory by itself. And then the other piece where you were talking about the the way in which we're structuring these things, great job. That's great.
It has to be, there has to be a need out there. Otherwise it's a creative hobby project, and that's not what we're building.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Listen to the market, take your business seriously, stay true to your values and your health. And I'd add, give yourself self-compassion along the way.
Good one. Good one.
Self-compassion balanced with honesty. Because I think we tend to have, we all tend to be too far one side or the other. We tend to have no self-compassion, and it's totally my fault. I've got to fix this. What's wrong with me? I'm going to ruin things. Or we're like, well, I've got to have self-compassion, so I need a me day. No, you need an office day. Like, you need to sit in your seat for 12 hours and get some grinding going on here, because you've had too many me days and me hours within your other stuff. So it's realizing, who are you? What is your natural bent? And acting accordingly.
Exclamation point.
Yes.
Thanks to you both for this 3-part series that has been, I would say, in my mind, fabulous. I hope people have gotten value from it. And if you'd like more of us talking and connecting on your business, join us at the retreat this fall.
Sounds great. Great job, Lee. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you. Great seeing you guys.
As we wrap up today's conversation, we hope one thing feels clear. Business success isn't just about the business itself. It's also about making sure you have your best energy, clarity, focus, and foundation of health. If today's episode sparked questions for you or made you realize it might be time to schedule some rejuvenation, we'd love to continue the conversation with you in person. This September, we're hosting our 8th annual coaching retreat and symposium at Estes Park, Colorado, a weekend designed specifically for health coaches who want deeper connection, meaningful growth, and space to focus on their own well-being. We're also offering a business-focused pre-conference session where we'll dive deeper into topics like pricing, business models, and building a coaching practice or offering that's both aligned and sustainable while supporting your well-being. Whether you're early in your coaching journey or years into practice, this weekend is an opportunity to step out of the day-to-day, connect with other coaches who truly get it, and walk away with clarity, tools, and renewed energy for the work that you do. Thanks for spending your time with us today on the Coaching Lab podcast. If this episode was helpful, be sure to share it with another coach who might need it, and we'll see you next time.